right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone, to the monthly Filmmaker Success Workshop Series. Our workshop today is Financing Your Second Feature. My name is Emily Smart, and I am the Filmmaker Liaison at Filmmaker Success. This class will last for about an hour and a half, and we invite you to turn on your cameras and raise your hands if you have any questions, rather than writing questions in the chat box. Joanne really doesn't follow the chat box because she's too much into teaching and she wants to interface with you one-on-one to see who's asking the question. Filmmaking is a serious business, but we don't like to take ourselves too seriously and always try to inject some fun in what we do at Filmmaker Success. Filmmaker Success is a place where we like to make movies, make money, and make the world a better place. Today, Joanne Butcher is our illustrious host, leader, everything. She is a consulting producer with over 100 independent filmmakers under her belt. With a wealth of experience in fundraising and distribution, Joanne has a proven track record of facilitating the sale of numerous feature films and participating in the distribution of, goodness, it's over 20 films at this point. As an expert in fundraising, Joanne has supported her clients through various channels, including major donors, grants, foundations, corporate sponsorships, and over 40 successful crowdfunding campaigns. In the coming months, that number is going to keep increasing. Her involvement with organizations such as Brown Girls Doc Mafia, Slam Dance, the Brazilian Film Festival in Miami, where she was part of the grand jury this past festival, and the Trinidad Tobago Film Festival, have made her an integral part of the film community. As a founder of Unstoppable, a disability film festival, and a frequent judge at the Forever Foundation, Joanne has been dedicated to mentoring and developing the careers of young creatives. Joanne's experience extends beyond fundraising and distribution, as she has directed a First Run Cinema and Film School in Miami Beach, Florida, where she created the Florida Feature Film Competition. The competition has provided filmmakers with a platform to uplevel their business and marketing packages while competing for a $200,000 prize. With 143 feature films in various stages of development from script to distribution, Joanne's specialty lies in helping filmmakers raise funds to get their projects made and distributed globally. Her extensive network and experience in the film industry make her the go-to consultant for independent filmmakers seeking support with fundraising and distribution. All right. So without further ado, Joanne should be joining us.
Thank you so much, Emily. It's always nice. I get to have a little breath while you do the introduction. So thank you very much. That's really nice. Welcome, everybody. I teach a class about once a month, and I always am looking for new things to teach, although basically I always teach the same thing, which is we're filmmakers, let's raise some money. That's pretty much my message. And but I particularly came up with this idea to teach a class that I haven't taught before, called Financing Your Second Feature, because I do talk about this all the time, and maybe I don't talk about it enough. So I thought, hey, I'm going to talk about it tonight. So one of my colleagues, Ben Yenny, who is a producer's rep, he likes to quote me particularly about this. And he says, Joanne always says, you can't make your second feature until you've made your first. And so, Stephen, thank you for laughing. You can't make your second feature until you've made your first. And what I mean by that when I talk about that is that a lot of filmmakers who actually do manage to get their first features made, who actually do manage to get their first features in distribution, are so completely exhausted by that experience that they don't actually get to make their second film. And I've said this many, many times, but I call my business Filmmaker Success. And one day, if Emily allows it, we have enough going on without this, but one day I'm going to change the name of my business from Filmmaker Success to Second Film. At this point, I don't necessarily have enough second films for people to really understand what that would mean. What would that mean, second film? You know, and it's really funny because a few years ago, I was at a talk given by, I don't remember her name, but anyway, the woman who back then anyway was the person who ran the Sundance Labs. If you're not familiar with the lab, so you can apply with a script to Sundance. If you get in the lab, you know, they might put you to the next lab, which is a producing lab, and they might put you to the next lab, which is a directing lab. And then, you know, if your film goes through all of that and they've helped to produce your film, and then your film premieres at Sundance, then you might win a post-production grant with Dolby, you know. Anyway, so if you get on the Sundance train of the Sundance Labs, it's really a great thing for your film and your career. But what she said was they were going to start a program, and this was after I had been saying this for years. They were going to start a program called Second Film, because what they saw was that first-time feature filmmakers couldn't pick themselves up to get onto their next film. They were so exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally, and I would say, worst of all, financially, by making their first film, that they couldn't scrape themselves up off the pavement to make their second film. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a very, very, very long time. Many years ago, I used to run a first-run cinema on Lincoln Road in Miami Beach, and a film school on Lincoln Road, Miami Beach. And this was back in, when did I do that? Well, we closed in 1990, is that right? We closed in 1990, or we closed into, I'm terrible with dates. Nadine says yes. But anyway, I was curious. We showed a film called The Watermelon Woman. And The Watermelon Woman was a mockumentary made by Cheryl Dunye, an African-American filmmaker. And The Watermelon Woman became one of my all-time favorite films. And a few years ago, I was at the 25th year anniversary of The Watermelon Woman. So that's how old it is. It's maybe 28 years old now, 29, something like that. And we showed The Watermelon Woman at the Alliance Cinema. And it was a fantastic film. Cheryl Dunye is an amazing director. She's now, you know, big time. Anyway, she made The Watermelon Woman with a very, very little amount of money. I highly recommend it to anybody to see. It's a really good example of a very, very micro budget first-time feature that has, you know, really, really played a big role in the culture. And I was interested in Cheryl Dunye and her work. And one year I was at Sundance, and I was always the one who was sent out in the mornings to buy tickets because I'm the early morning person. Everybody else was out partying all night. So I would be up at 7 in the morning out getting tickets. And somebody came down the line one day and said, I have a ticket to a surprise screening. Does anyone want it? And I said, me. We didn't even know what it was, right? So I go to this screening, and it was packed because it was Sundance, so every seat was full, but we didn't know what the movie was, right? So the movie turned out to be Cheryl Donier's second feature film. And I just couldn't believe that I was at her second feature film. Emily, I would love it if you find her second feature film and what the distance in time was from The Watermelon Woman to the second one. That would be really, really interesting. So I'm at Sundance, I'm at the premiere of The Watermelon Woman. It turned out that the film wasn't quite ready in time to be shown as a regular part of Sundance. So we saw maybe a cut that was maybe didn't have full color done or something. I don't know what it was, but anyway, we saw this film. It blew my mind, and then I started to think, well, how did it take this many years for Cheryl, who's clearly brilliant, to go from her first film to her second film, Stranger Inside? Yeah, terrifying movie. And why did it take so many years to go from one to the next? And I started to do some research. Cheryl Donier is an African-American woman filmmaker. And when I was doing this research, so this would have been about in 2001, thank you, Emily, I found out that there were 6 Black women directors at that time who had ever made a second feature film. 6 Black women. And this just blew my mind. Oh, my goodness. Excuse me, but this just blew my mind that there were only 6 Black women in the world in about 2000, 2001 who had ever made a second feature film. Thank goodness that's changed since then, but it made an impression on me. And I started to think, what does it take for somebody to get to make a second film? What does it take to have a filmmaker actually get to the point where they make a second feature film? And the first thing is that, first of all, to make a second film, as Ben always quotes me, Joanne says, you can't make your second feature until you've made your first. So the first step to making your second feature is to make your first, okay? And so what I'm going to do tonight in our kind of hour-ish here is go over about 3 of the main things that I think that a filmmaker wants to be thinking about when they get to their second film. And the first thing I want to talk about is the first film. And as I was saying, even Sundance thought about putting this program together called Second Film. And as I said, they stole my title. Well, they didn't, because they didn't know. They didn't know about it. But they had recognized the problem. They had recognized the problem of getting your first film done and not being able to make it to your second because people are so destroyed. So as a coach, I'm working with my clients on mostly raising money and delivering a film to a distributor. And the lowest bar that I want to see for my clients is that they get distribution, that they get international distribution for their films. That's the lowest bar that I have. And in some ways, my bar is a lot lower than that of some of my clients, right? Because they're making their first film and they want to achieve all kinds of goals, like, winning an Oscar and, all these kind of things. Stephen, thank you for laughing at my jokes. I really appreciate it. So, that's great. He's got an Oscar. He's got an Oscar right there. So sometimes what I'm doing with my clients is trying to kind of narrow the goals so that they become more achievable. And often that includes figuring a number to raise, a figure to raise money that is not crazy. It's not too big so that we're not, you know, looking for money for 6 years, 10 years, 20 years. And when I say these numbers, I know people that I am thinking about in my head who have been looking to raise money to make their first feature for over 20 years, okay? I'm talking real people. I talk to filmmakers every day, all right? So filmmakers will spend years and years and years and years spinning their wheels. And often it's because on that first film, they're trying to raise a number that's too high and they just won't get there. I have a client, and she was, for 6 years before she was working with me, she was trying to raise $69 million to make her first feature film. And that may sound crazy. Some of you may think that sounds crazy. But she did what a lot of filmmakers do when they think that they're being really professional. She went and hired a line producer, and that was what the line producer said the budget was. This is such a common error that filmmakers make, such a common error. And as I said, a lot of times filmmakers have all kinds of ideas about what they want to do with their first film. And this is interesting, but I'd have to say, and I have to say, I've written a book. It's coming out January the 1st. And I talk about a lot of this stuff where I know the way that filmmakers think, but I can't always necessarily explain it or give you a theory about why they think this way. But so they often have so many goals for their films that it makes it really an impossibility. So what I try to do with my clients is try to narrow the possibilities, and I always add to their goals getting distribution at an international level, because that's not always on filmmakers' minds as a goal for their first film. They'll often tell me, I want to get my film into a festival. And I think it's great to get your film into a festival, but I think it's more important to get distribution. So those are the goals I have for a first-time film feature. And I just told, who was it who was on the call today? Anyway, I just told some of my clients today. I had a call with one of my clients today. I'm not going to say which country because then we'll know who we're talking about. But anyway, one of my clients has made a film in a foreign country in a foreign language. And we set a goal to raise $500,000, which she did. It's her first fiction feature film. And she set a goal for herself for the film to be that country's Oscar nomination for Best Foreign Film. And I watched her film last night, and I think it's going to achieve that goal. I really do think it's going to achieve that goal. So we were able to set other goals, but my number one goal was for her was that she raised the money she needed to make her movie. And one of the reasons that she's been able to achieve such a high level with that film is that with that money, she was able to hire a cast of really well-known actors in that country. The top TV famous people in that country. So it's not as though we can't set higher goals, but fundamentally making your first feature, the most important thing is to get the money you need so that you can get a high enough quality production so that you can get distribution. So, okay, let's say now you've made your first feature film, it's in distribution, it's out there, and you're fine. You know, you're not in debt. You're not in debt to anybody. You don't owe anybody any money from making the movie. You don't owe yourself any money from making the movie. These are the kind of super sexy goals I have for my clients. Really sexy. You're not in debt. We don't put things on credit cards around filmmaker success, right? And that the film gets delivered to a distributor and it gets international distribution. And you are mentally, physically, emotionally in one piece. You know, when I started on my journey, my mentor, Murray Warshawski, he wrote a book, which is kind of the fundraising Bible for documentary filmmakers. It's called Shaking the Money Tree. So Murray Warshawski was my mentor, and he had this video that he showed. And it was all these feature filmmakers who had mortgaged their house, who had ended up divorcing their wives, had, you know, all these like terrible things because they had put the film above everything else, you know. And I encourage my clients to not do any of those things. We've had no breakups in filmmaker success. We have had some almost divorces turn around. I don't know quite how that happened, but we have had that happen. We've had no divorces yet, and no houses lost, and right, nothing like that. Okay. So, but I learned that very, very early on, that that is the way that filmmakers were behaving with their first feature. I love to tell this story. So I still kind of go to Sundance every year. And one year I went to Sundance. I was with one of my clients and we watched this movie. I think it was pretty much sold out. I think we were at the premiere of this movie, and it was a mockumentary about this woman who had stolen some secret information from her company and was on the run because people were chasing her. Anyway, I thought it was really great. I just thought it was so much fun. And my client who I was with just hated it. I'm like, well, you know, it's a festival. Not everybody likes everything. Well, turns out I was the only person in the whole of Park City who liked this movie. Everybody hated it. And so when you go to Sundance, you start seeing the same people over and over again because it's a little tiny place and you're all watching movies. So we would keep bumping into these filmmakers who'd made this film. And every time we saw them, they were a bit more depressed. And the second screening of their film came, by the third screening, nobody was coming to see their film. Everybody already knew this was a dud. And every time I saw them, I would try to cheer them up. And I couldn't cheer them up. It was terrible. And so most people don't understand that you can get a film into Sundance and maybe it's a dud. And you can walk away from Sundance not only with not having distribution for your film, but nobody likes your film anyway. And what tends to happen is a filmmaker makes a film and they get their film into Sundance and they're like, oh, now I'll put everything on a credit card because it's going to go great, you know? So this filmmaker had put on a credit card, bringing all, you know, the crew and everybody up to Sundance and putting them up in hotels, and it's very expensive. And probably ran up another $10,000, $15,000, making the assumption I'm now at Sundance, now I'm going to get distribution for my film, and they don't get distribution for their films. And I think a lot of people do not realize that. And they think, oh, I got into Sundance, it's a golden ticket. No, it's not. So they were way in debt by the time they finished their Sundance experience, no distribution and no chance of making any money from their film. This is not what we want to do. Okay. So you've made it through your first film. You're not in debt. You're not destroyed physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, any of that. You still have friends. You're still talking to your crew and your cast, ideally. We've had to fire a couple of people here and there, but mostly not. So you're getting ready to make your second film, your second feature. And this, again, is another place that filmmakers can get stuck. And so I just want to go over what I think are the three main places that I think filmmakers can get stuck making their second feature. So the first one is around budget. And this is the mistake that I feel is the most common one for filmmakers to make. So let's assume the first one was micro budget. So you make a micro budget film, and then when it comes to your second film, now you obviously want to increase your budget for the second film. What would be a number that you would like to make your second feature? Who would like to be brave and say a number that they'd like to make their second feature film? Nobody is brave enough. Nobody is brave enough. Come on, give me a number.
How about 300,000?
Well, that now, Leo, you're cheating.
No, okay.
300,000. Very good.
Cancel that.
Stephen, what did you want to say for your second film? Oh, what did Stephen? Can you unmute? Yes, there you go. What was that? 7? I keep missing it. 7, 8. 8 what? 8 what? 8 million. 8 million. Oh, okay. And Anon Zaeta said 100 million. Tom Bellows said 200K. Who's JB? I'm JB. Who's JB? There can't be 2 JBs. John Brooks said 150,000. Tom Bellows said 200,000. Carlton Bush said 1.5 million. Maria said 500,000. So, the reason I said Leo was cheating is because Leo is one of my clients. And Maria is cheating because she is one of my clients. But anyway, so I think it's interesting. Tom and John said 150 or $200,000. So I'm imagining that the first budget was probably in that range, 100, 150, 200,000, something like that. So ideally, when you go to your second film, you would increase in budget a little bit. And this is a very kind of tricky place, because I'm not gonna somebody wrote to me privately and said 100 million. So this is where people go really wrong. If you're making your second film, it's very, very unlikely that it's going to be $100 million. If you could tell me of anybody as a filmmaker who made their second film at $100 million, I'd love to hear about it. But even some of the filmmakers who've made these kind of rocket to the top, rocket to the majors, they didn't get to make their second film for $100,000. The one who I felt was the fastest that I've noticed was Ryan Coogler, but his second film definitely was not $100 million. So 1.5 million, that's an interesting number. $1.5 million is a very interesting number. And I feel as though 1.5 million is about the most that I would suggest anybody aim for their second film. And this is one of the models that I think of. So does everybody know who Barry Jenkins is? The director, Barry Jenkins? Does everybody know?
No.
No. Okay. So Anthony, you know who Barry Jenkins is, don't you? No? Oh, okay. All right. So Barry Jenkins is the writer and director of Moonlight. So Moonlight was a $1.5 million budget movie. Does anybody know what the budget of what the budget of Barry Jenkins' first movie was? Anybody like to guess if you don't know? Does anybody know? Take a guess. John, did you know that? Did you know? John Brooks, where are you? Where are you? Yeah. John Brooks, did you know 15K was the number? Oh, okay. So the actual number for Barry Jenkins' first feature was $13,000. And I'm always telling this story, and I'm always saying to people, go and watch Barry Jenkins' first feature film. And nobody ever does. Nobody ever listens to me, okay? But it would really, really, really be valuable for you to go and look at what a genius can do with $13,000, okay? What an absolute genius can do. And if you go and, YouTube search or whatever, go listen to some interviews with Barry Jenkins, you will hear in the first minute the guy's a genius, So he made his first feature film, Medicine for Melancholy, for $13,000, and it got into Sundance. And the other thing that I suggest is that you look at Medicine for Melancholy and ask yourself, why did Medicine for Melancholy get into Sundance? It's a very interesting question. What was it that made that movie a Sundance movie? Sundance has a very, very particular aesthetic. It's very interested in what we call in England, I don't think it's an American expression, we call it hard news. Hard news. Hard news is the types of things that are on the news, murders, shootings, killings, political topics. Those are the kind of topics that make it to Sundance. So have a look at Medicine for Melancholy and see what it was about that film that got it selected into Sundance. And here's another person who spent the next 8 years not making another film. 8 years Barry Jenkins went before he made Moonlight at $1.5 million. And I used to say, if he had been my client, I wouldn't have let that happen. I wouldn't have let him go for 8 years without making a movie. But then I heard him give a talk in Miami because he's a Miami boy. And he said that the reason it took him 8 years to make his second film is because he did what so many filmmakers do who get a film at Sundance. He moved to LA. And he moved to LA and he started pitching, and he's like, I had a movie at Sundance, and and he started pitching these movies, and nobody was interested. And he did that for about 2 years, and he was ready to give up. And at some point during those 8 years, he was working at McDonald's. And finally, a producer friend of his said she would mentor him. And she met with him once a week and had him pitch her projects. And during that time, he pitched her Moonlight and If Beale Street Could Talk. And those were the next movies that he made. But, so I feel as though if you are Barry Jenkins and you're a genius, and if you actually get to make your first film, probably for more than $13,000, but you make your first film and it got into Sundance, and then you're a genius and you make your second film and it's 1.5 million. I think that's a big jump, but Barry Jenkins was able to do it. So if you're a genius like Barry Jenkins, then maybe you can do it too. Right? But if you want to go higher than that $1.5 million budget, that's going to be a very unusual thing. There have been a couple of people who've done it, I'm sure. There have been many people who've done it, but it's a very, very, very unlikely scenario to be able to go higher than that. So, you know, Leo gave her the number 300,000, Maria gave the number 500,000. So between those, in that range, I think would be a great idea to go for your next film. Under $300,000, I was just talking about this today. Yeah, under $300,000. So SAG says that $300,000 is the level for under which is ultra low budget. And so when you hire a SAG actor in a under $300,000 movie, then the rate today is something like $200, including benefits. And then SAG is on strike for an 11% increase. So let's call it $250 a day. So you have your SAG actors, $250 a day. If you go above $300,000, you go into the next bracket and it's more like 1,000 a day, but I don't know it off the top of my head. I don't know the number off the top of my head. Carlton says, I am most definitely not a genius. Thank you for saying that, Carlton, because I tell this story about Barry Jenkins and I make that point that he is a genius and everybody knows he's a genius as soon as he opens his mouth. Everybody knows he's a genius, I'm telling you. And I just wonder how many people in the room are actually saying, I'm not a genius. Or if they're saying, I'm a genius. I always just wonder. So Carlton, thank you for saying that piece. So if you are going to go above $300,000, you're in that new bracket. And then that 300,000 to 1.5 million, we are now in the range of films then I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by the chat. I can't stand it. I'm going to turn it off, actually, for myself. I'm going to turn it off. When you are making a film for something between 300,000 and 1.5 million, by that point, we have really entered the second part of what I'm going to talk about, which is that we're really basing our film on the value of the actors who are attached in that film. And so I think that a lot of times filmmakers think that, well, they're working in that range and they can't necessarily afford A-listers, or they can't necessarily afford the top A-listers. But the thing is that there are many actors who are not necessarily Tom Cruise, you know, but there are actors who are, you know, the top Bs, or you know, the top B pluses in the acting world or whatever. And they are not like the A-listers. The A-listers, you know, Tom Cruise is booked until 2027. You know, he's already got his movies scheduled till 2027, 2028, something like that. But pretty quickly it drops off, and all the rest of the actors are looking for work. And the thing that I have really learned about actors over the years is that they love to work. They love to work. And so you can cast actors in your movies who are maybe not worth, I don't know what Tom Cruise is worth, maybe $50 million a picture. I don't know. But, you know, so maybe you can't get Tom Cruise, but you can get actors who are going to be worth $1 million, $2 million to your film. And just to sort of explain that a little bit, because I think people misunderstand this when I talk about it. But if you make, let's call it $1 million, because I'm terrible at math. Let's say your movie is a $1 million movie, and you bring in an actor who's worth $2 million. That doesn't mean to say you pay them $2 million. They might still work for you at SAG minimum, which, as I said, is about $1,000 or something for the day. And so you hire your actors for however many days, you pay them the SAG minimum, and maybe you give them some points on the back end of the film, and now you brought on an actor that was worth $2 million to your film. Can you see that if you're making a film for $1 million and you have an actor that's worth $2 million, that would be interesting to an investor? That would be an interesting business proposition for an investor. So when you're working in this budget range, you always need to be able to justify your budget. That's a good word. I don't usually use that word. That came to me. You need to be able to justify your budget with the dollar value of the actors that you have in your project. And, you know, we were talking about this the other day on the Clubhouse that we do every week. But there are so many things about the film industry that are changing, you know, every day, you know, but this issue of budgeting a film according to the value of the actors is actually something that has been used in the film industry for 100 years. It's just that today's actors have the name Tom Cruise or I can't think of one actor's name right now. I can't think of any actors' names. They've gone out of my head. But 100 years ago, it would have been Tallulah Bankhead, you know? And so the budget of the film is always based on the value of the stars in the film. And nothing has changed about that for 100 years. So I had a client who, before he started working with me, he raised $1.7 million to make a movie, and he did not know this particular piece. He did not know that he needed to cast actors who were worth more than $1.7 million in his movie. And so, you know, he spent the money on production or whatever. And, you know, he was horrified to find that the movie has now made $330,000. But he did not make the movie casting names that were worth more than $1.7 million. And he didn't know that business detail. So, you know, and so I said to him, which I say all the time to people is, you know, are your investors people who are going to break your legs? And he said, no. Nobody laughed. Stephen didn't even laugh. I said to him, are your investors who just lost $1.4 million, you know, thank you, Nadine. Nadine laughed, she said. Nadine laughed, thank you. Are they going to break your legs? Because, you know, you never know who maybe you got to invest in a film. And he said, no, they're not going to break my legs. And I said, okay, will they still speak to you? And he said, some of them will, some of them won't. And he lives in a very small town, so they all know each other. And so I said, okay, well, go back to the ones who will speak to you and tell them you're going to make another film and you are going to be working with somebody who is going to make sure that this film makes money. And so I saw about 5 minutes of it last week. He sent me about 5 minutes of the film. They shot it in July. And it looks great. And we are working on making sure that film is going to make money. Like all my clients, he has distribution for his film. He's going to take it to AFM and get more offers of distribution. I had a client last year. She took her feature film to AFM. She came home with 15 offers of distribution. So yes, he's going to be making money on this film. But yeah, he didn't know that fundamental piece of business, which is how you need to, yeah, justify is the word I like, justify the budget. Okay, so the mistake that most filmmakers make is that they're thinking about their budget without thinking about how to justify that budget. Okay, so I remember one time I met a filmmaker and he said, I'm making my first feature. And I said, oh, what's the budget? And he said, $2 million. And I sort of went, oh, surprised. And he said, oh, well, it's all being shot underwater. So, it's expensive. So he was going to make the same mistake as my client made, making a film that had a high budget because of production, but it didn't have a way to bring the return on investment at all. And you can't bring the return on investment from anything other than your celebrity talent. There's no other way to do it. So it doesn't matter if you're shooting underwater. It doesn't matter, what the production is or is about, whatever. You've got to have names that are worth more than the budget you're spending. And that's the way Hollywood works. It's pretty much the only way Hollywood works. So once you have come up with a budget for your film, then you need to make sure that you bring on the talent that's worth more than your investors are going to spend. So I wonder, for the two people who came up with the very, the 150, John and Tom, can I ask you a little bit about why you picked 150,000 and 200,000? What were you thinking about, John? Yeah, go ahead.
I picked that number because my first one was 15,000. It was a short.
Oh, it was a short. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay, great. So I'm not counting a short as being a first feature, right, John? But I think that going to 150,000 is a very quote unquote sensible number to go with for your first feature. I always talk to my clients about 40,000 as a minimum for your first feature. And I feel justified now in saying 40,000 because Ben Wheatley, who's a very famous English director, he says if you can raise £30,000, that you can make a feature film. So £30,000 and 40,000 is about the same. And
in my case, I'm Tom, actually. In my case, I ended up doing my first feature for about 60,000, about 100,000 totaled in after festivals, marketing expenses, everything. So realistically, the shooting, all pre-production and shooting ended up being about 60,000 or so. So a little graduation up to 150, maybe 200,000 was what I was thinking.
Yes, I think that's great. That really makes sense. That makes sense, Tom. And, I feel as though, sometimes I'll ask a new client, well, how much do you think you can raise? And they'll give a number. And it's very interesting because that question is not really based on anything. And yet they pick a number, and that's the number that they believe they can raise. And so that's the number that they can raise. And, 150,000 is kind of one level of movie, and then 1.5 is another level. I have about 4 films this year going into production that are over 1.5 million. And they are, one is in Trinidad and Tobago, one is in Puerto Rico, one I just heard this weekend in Georgia is fully funded at 5 million. And then there's another one, in Washington State that's being made, 1.8 million. So this year I have 4 clients with films at that level, and they all just felt very confident that they could raise that kind of money, even though it was their first feature. And they tend to be working with seasoned producers and things like that have allowed them to go to that level. But to me, it's all about fundraising. So I feel as though John and Tom are both very sensible, because what they're saying is, I know that I could raise this amount for my first film. I think it was 15 that John said for his first film. So to go to 150 that's a big leap in fundraising terms to go. But it's relatively sensible. Nadine, did you say oh yes, Nadine, you made your first feature for 300,000. How did you raise the money for your feature?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
I didn't. I had, the movie was called Mixed Blessings, and it was a mixed blessing that the producers wrote it, and they'd never, one of them was an old friend of mine. And I had gone on to, I met her at Strasberg. I had gone on to be Lee Strasberg's protege and the only woman in his directing unit. So and then on to after he died, I stayed on at the Actor Studio. So I had a really good connection with talent. And I went on to be Shelley Winters brought me back here. I was a script supervisor. So that was my film school. So I was ready to go, ready to go, chomping at the bit. I studied the visual components with Bruce Block, if anybody's ever heard of him. I was so ready to go. The one thing I never prepared was, how do you get people to listen to you when you know what you're doing and they don't, and they're putting up the money? I never took that class. So no matter how I worked out shooting it and composed it, they would, anyway, so they undid whatever, most of what could have been a no-brainer to work. They had raised the money, and they insisted on shooting it in 35, which I thought was ridiculous. And there was a camera problem, so we wound up having 10 days to shoot a feature, which I did it, I got it in. And what was the question?
I can't remember.
Sorry.
Oh, how did you raise the money?
I didn't raise the money, and I don't know now. I have years of footage for a documentary that if I had somebody to edit at this point, I could raise money to finish it. I have a lot of famous people that have since passed away. And I have a script for a feature as well. So
what would you like to raise? What would you like to raise for your second feature?
I'm punchy. I don't know. I don't know what editors cost. I have a lot of stuff that's done. And I think if I edit it, what I've got, it'll be really clear to me what I need to finish it. And I don't know. I don't know about money. I know where to put the camera. That's my problem. I did something that I thought.
Nadine, I just want to say before you start beating yourself up, that first of all, you're not special. You sound like every other filmmaker. Okay, you sound like every other filmmaker I ever talked to. So I don't think it's you or anything like that. But it's just that filmmakers are thinking about the story and they're thinking about their film. And they're not necessarily thinking about the money. So when I ask questions like, well, how much do you need? How much are you going to raise? People don't know the answer. And it's because you haven't been taught to think that way. You know, whereas say when I was just talking, I can't remember if it was John or Tom, but who said, well, I raised 15,000 for my first film, so I could imagine getting to 150. And that's the way that I think, and that's the way that I teach my clients. Instead of going down the road that you were going, which is, well, you know, if I got this footage and then I have to find an editor and how much does that cost? I like to think, and this may sound crazy, it's just that I've seen it work over and over and over again. How much do you think you could raise?
Me personally? Nothing. I don't know.
Well, let's get on a call and talk, Nadine. Because
Please.
I can definitely help you.
Sorry, everybody. Money is.
No, Nadine, please don't. Everybody is feeling exactly the same way, you know, because it's just not the way that filmmakers have been taught. And, you know, I have a client who went to film school. It was his big dream. He's Trinidadian, I'm half Trinidadian. It was his big dream was to go to film school in America. He wanted to go to film school in America. And his plan was to borrow $150,000 and go to film school in America. I said, over my dead body. So we worked together. He ended up getting a Fulbright scholarship, paid for his travel, his accommodation, his tuition, his food, everything. Just saved somebody $150,000 of debt, right? Great. So it comes to the part of his master's degree where he was supposed to make a film as part of the, you know, and he thought he'd work with me. So he's like, oh, okay, I'm going to go raise some money now. And guess what the film school said? Oh, no, you're not. That's against the rules. You're not allowed to raise any money. And that is really common in film schools. And as he pointed out to me, all the rich kids could spend whatever they wanted on making their films. But he couldn't. He wasn't a rich kid. And he did it, you know, he got his film made and all of that stuff. But all I'm saying is that not only are film schools not teaching filmmakers to raise money, they're actively preventing them from doing so, you know. And then if you didn't go to film school, then you don't have that either, you know. So so don't feel stupid, because it's just that filmmakers have not been trained in any of this. In fact, I'm a fundraiser. I never got trained in fundraising until I became a fundraiser, because there's really no training out there. So I specialize in fundraising for film, and I teach filmmakers how to raise money, but it's not like, you know, there are fundraising schools dotted all over the place. You know, it's just not, there's not. So does anybody have any questions about this? I talked about the budget. I talked about calculating the value of the film based on the actors that you have. And I talked about not being able to make your second film until you've made your first. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? There was a whole bunch of stuff going on in the chat. Come on camera and say something. Who has a question?
Well, I just posted a question. I can
Yeah.
sort of say it out loud.
So
which is-
I just don't want to try and deal with the chat. So if you, thank you, go ahead.
How do you calculate the value of the actor attachments? I'm working on another film right now, and we do have, and I'm not going to say who it is, but an actor who actually, you know, who was a relatively popular TV actor for some time, and he's attached to the project. And I'm really trying to, as I'm looking to fundraise essentially off of that, I'm really trying to find what that value is. You know, IMDb Star Meter says he's in the top 5,000, but that doesn't really give me anything monetarily to hang my hat on, or it'd be bankable. Sales agency analysis, I could go down that route, but that means going sort of in pocket via the sales agencies, unless there's somebody who really wants to do that work gratis on the IFCOM and give some sort of letter of interest. But you know, it's sort of it's always a chicken and egg kind of situation, it seems. But to really then calculate that value that we're talking about here, really, right? If it's, you know, a 1.5 million and that person can bring 2 million, well, then the film will probably get made. Well, that's sort of what I'm butting up against, is how do we really know what that value is?
Yeah, so the way that you really know what that value is you get that from an international sales agent. So the next step for you would be to get an international sales agent to get you that number and give you that letter. And so, you know, they have They may charge you money, they may not, but that's what you need to be able to take that number to investors. The way that Hollywood works is that that letter that says this actor is worth X number of dollars, you can take that to a bank. So that's really the next step that you want to take with your actor. Anything above, say, 2,500 is A-list, and then below that is not. And you know, it's a really good thing to go and get that dollar value, because it may not quite be what you expect. But if you have that number, then you can really take that to investors. You can take that to the bank, as they say. But yeah, great question. Tom, was it Tom who asked that question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Gregory, go ahead.
My question is, when you try to raise the money, like through Indigo or something like that, what can you say? I mean, I'm the biggest. I don't do very well with this. Nobody answers it. Nobody says what.
Okay, so thank you, Gregory, for that question. There was a lot in there. So I teach 7 ways of fundraising. And of those 7 ways of fundraising, the first 2 I count are individual donors, because the truth is that the majority of all money that's ever given in a year, it's something like 85% of all money that's given, of the billions and billions and billions of dollars that are given every year, are given by individuals. So 85% of all monies given are from individuals. So then I divide individual donors into 2 types: small donors and major donors. So you mentioned Indiegogo, which is small donors, and that's crowdfunding, you know, and in the past, we used to use other ways of trying to raise small donors. We used to do, you know, we'd sell raffle tickets, or we'd do a bake sale or something like that, you know, but now it's pretty much crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is a great way of getting small donors. And part of crowdfunding means, you know, you make that video and you talk to people about raising money. And I find that one of the biggest things is that you have to be able to speak and to be able to market your film. And I find that, frankly, most filmmakers absolutely suck when it comes to marketing their films, which is really crazy, because filmmakers are storytellers. So, you know, marketing should come naturally, right? Except it doesn't. It doesn't. So anyway, what I do with my clients is I do a lot of training on verbal pitching, as well as every other kind of materials that we do for fundraising. But verbal pitching is an incredibly valuable skill. I believe it's the most important skill for a 21st century producer to have, is the verbal pitch. So what you're pointing to, Gregory, is that you're saying, I guess you're saying you've tried crowdfunding, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of filmmakers have tried crowdfunding and they haven't got anywhere. But I really believe that it's very possible to raise money through crowdfunding. I start my beginners off with the choice to raise either $11,000 or $12,000, and then we just focus on that. And I've now run over 40. Well, I don't run them; my clients run them. 40 successful crowdfunding campaigns. I see my client Anthony. He was on here before. Anyway, he raised $51,000 for his crowdfunding campaign. That was for a feature, not for a short. But still, you know, we go for amounts that are by filmmaking standards modest. They're by filmmaking standards modest, and then we make that crowdfunding part of a larger fundraising plan to build out, you know, the $150,000, $200,000, you know, for that first film, and then as we're talking about going higher for the second film, right? But I wanted to ask Emily. Emily just created this new page for our website, and it just has a lot of posters of my clients' films that we raised the money for and got into distribution. And we're still working on it. It's still not exactly correct, but it includes, you know, about 20 films that people have raised money for. But we, you know, if I told the story of how they raised the money for those films, it's usually some of this and some of that and a bit of this and a bit of that, and, you know, so it's, especially for your first film, it's, you know, putting bits together, unless you're Nadine and you have somebody who puts in the whole money. Okay, so I have a mantra, which is no fundraising without training and without support. So I think what a lot of filmmakers are doing is they're trying crowdfunding as a type of fundraising and many other types of fundraising, but without any training. And I just think it's not fair. You know, it's not fair to think to yourself that you can take on something like a crowdfunding campaign. And some people have, you know, they've done it without training and it kind of worked, whatever. And the words that filmmakers use about those is, they say it was brutal. They say it was brutal, or it was horrific, or something like that. But when you're trained to raise money, now you can raise money. That's my thinking. That's what I do, is I train people to raise money, to be able to raise money. And what we were talking about with this issue with the names and everything is that when you're raising money from investors, then thank you, Melissa. Hey, Melissa, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing, no, Kari, keep talking.
No, I'm just glad to see you, and I hadn't said hello yet.
Yeah, no, I'm here for a little bit longer till I have a program, so
Okay. Oh, okay.
see you later.
Melissa runs a fabulous film organization, so thank you for coming. But so especially if I sort of go back to, we're talking about making your second film, then one of the things that you're going to have when you're making that second film is you're going to have that first film under your belt. I don't think a lot of times, I think filmmakers don't realize how much they're going to grow and gain through the process of making that first feature film. It's like a mountain to climb, all the things that you have to learn. And once you also have as your goal getting distribution for that first feature, that's like another whole piece of the puzzle, you know. This week, a couple of my clients asked me for a copy of a deliverables list, a distribution deliverables list, because it's no fun to end up finishing your film and then realizing, oh, I'm not ready for distribution. My film isn't ready for distribution. So we plan all of that way from the beginning, you know. But you learn so much in making that first film. And in the second film, that particular mountain is not one you have to climb. You've already made a feature film. You've already seen it from concept to distribution, and you don't have to learn all of that stuff again. In a way, on the second film, you can put more of your focus on raising the money. And by that time, you're probably working with investors. And especially if you're up at that, 1.5 million or $1 million level, you're looking for investors. And with them, you need to be able to really show how they're going to make their money back. And that's what they're going to be interested in. Okay, who else has a question? Anybody else have a question? Nadine, were you trying to speak?
Reels, how important is a director's reel in this process?
Um,
Kind of like the pitching and the whole.
I think it's going to depend. I mean, I don't know that investors are looking particularly at the director's reel. I think that
Do they want to see pieces of what's been shot already?
no, I don't think so. No. I mean, there's a whole process of making a proof of concept that is certainly a tried and true way of raising money for making a film, where people do shoot something or they have something to show to get the investor. I have a business colleague who raised a $5 million movie based on a proof of concept. But in the end, ultimately, it was based on the names in the film. That's how they got the money. But the director's reel, no. The one reason that I kind of stop at
a sizzle or a teaser of any kind that you've already got for the project?
No, I don't. But that idea is called a proof of concept. And that is definitely a way that people have raised money to make their movies from investors. I don't think that it's necessarily, but it definitely is a way that people have used. When I was talking about that 1.5 as sort of a bit of a ceiling for a second feature, I think that it's great if you already have a feature that you've made. What I found is that with my clients who are working at that kind of budget and it's their first feature, that does tend to come up, that investors are concerned that it's their first feature. As I said, we have 4 that are going ahead. One got a grant for 1.3 million. One had 3 million of her own money to put in a movie. They all have sort of a different story, but that being a first-time director is a tricky thing. And once you start to go above 1.5, investors won't come in for a first-time director. That's what I'm seeing. So again, anybody can interrupt me if you have any questions, but anyway, as you all know, my name is Joanne Butcher. I would love to talk to you about working with me. I would love to teach you how to raise money. I can be 100% sure nobody has ever taught you unless you've worked with me. And I'm thrilled to see some of my clients on here today. Leo is working on a couple of features. Paul is working on his first feature. Maria is almost at the end. She's got one more shoot for her feature film. Yinka, thank you for joining us all the way from Wales, Yinka. And Anthony. Hi, Yinka. Anthony was here anyway, and he is his first feature is an animated feature. And Nadine, book a time on my calendar that Emily just put in the chat, and we can talk. But Armando, we're going to be starting work any minute. So that's great. But basically, filmmakers have been taught have been taught or have taught themselves how to write scripts, how to direct movies, how to direct actors, how to edit, how to do all of these things, but they have never been taught how to raise money. And so basically working with me, you get to work with somebody who's been raising money for a very long time. I specialize in raising money for film, and you get to work with a producer who's been down this road many times before. So I would love to work with you and teach you this stuff that nobody's taught you. And I think my next class is going to be called, I even skipped movie number 3. And my next class is going to be, what is the next class called, Emily? Making your
Finance your fourth feature film and beyond.
Your fourth feature film and beyond. So thank you, Emily. It's I have a small group of clients who've worked with me over the long term. And bye, Melissa. Take care. Thanks for coming. I have a small group of clients who work with me long term, and one of my clients is on his fourth feature film. Another one of my clients is currently on his fourth feature film. We're actually going to be pitching his film in November at a market, and then we're going to be pitching the film. The fourth film, which he's in post-production on, and his fifth film. And then I have a couple of very advanced documentary clients. One of my documentary clients, Thomas Allen Harris, is probably on about his 8th feature film. And we have raised nearly $1 million so far for that project. We've raised $2 million for a previous project of his. And then I have another very advanced documentary client, Andrea Kalin, and we're raising about $300,000 for a documentary short that she's making that's very politically timely, politically sensitive. So when you get to the point where you're at your fourth film, your fifth, once you are on that roll that I think everybody wants to get to, then you use different strategies and work on different things. But I forgot to ask that at the beginning, like who here has already made a feature film? That was supposed to be my first question. I completely forgot. But when you're on your first feature film, it's about getting enough money to be able to make that feature film so that you can move on to the next one. And so, making the effort to get to that $100,000, $200,000 film for your first film is really a great way to start. It's a great way to start. As I said, not all my clients go for micro budget. Some of them go for higher budgets, but we definitely have a lot of films. I just wanted to share with everybody, Emily made a new page for us. Did you put that one in the chat, Emily? Am I seeing it? Did you put it?
Yeah, it's in there. I'll put it again.
I'm not seeing it. I'm sorry. I really have a hard time following the chat as well when I'm teaching. But let me show you some of these, because nobody's asking questions, so I can talk. So I'll share my screen. So Emily put this together, and we are basically showing the films that we have that are already out there. So they're all in order of the year that they came out. So here's a documentary. This was a $500,000 film. Family Pictures USA, we raised, as I said, about $2 million for a 3-part series. Death of a Fool was a micro budget film, and actually Ismail, this film, he Ismail, after he made this film, he was determined he was going to pay all his investors back. And he spent about a year studying marketing. He absolutely fell in love with marketing. It was really fun. Most filmmakers are like, oh, marketing, I hate it. You know, I'll do a little bit. Ismail just fell in love with it. So by the end of the year, he had paid back all his investors for his film, Death of a Fool. That was great. The Mentor, I think that was my first client that I got when I started fundraising. I mean, working as a coach. And Moaz made that film, micro budget. In the Wine Dark Sea was a very low budget documentary about wine. And she actually has a second one. I'm not sure if it's on here, but she has two films. She has The Wine Hunter, which is another, and this particular filmmaker is a wine expert, and she's getting a certification to do something about wine. And, you know, Chris, who here made Bad Detectives, he's the one who's now on his fourth film. He has two features currently in post-production, late post-production. The Yellow Wallpaper, we raised the majority of that money in a crowdfunding campaign. The Contrast is Chris's second film. Brotherly Lies was Mark's second film. He's now finishing his third film. Box of Rain is a documentary. Queen's Influence is a documentary. Symphony, this is actually, Leo will be interested in this. This was my client made a short film, and she ended up meeting these people on Clubhouse, and they put together an anthology of horror shorts. So her film is one of the shorts in the anthology. Oh, here's the other wine movie. This one is a feature horror film made in Japan. Ooh, if you click on it, the trailer starts. That's awesome. Move Me No Mountain, Debbie Richards. She has a great story. When she came to me, she had a very difficult time believing that she could raise any money. She had already tried it before. 3 years before, she had tried to raise money to make her first feature and had failed. So she was very cute, because she signed up to work with me, but she did not believe she could raise money. And she had a goal of raising, I think she was $60,000 she wanted to raise. And she ended up raising $70,000, and she made this film, this feature film. She's now finishing her second film and ready to shoot her third one next spring. Shadows in Mind, another film by Mark, and Homestead. Homestead, this particular client is now working with me on his fourth film. And then these are films that I worked on fundraising, not on distribution. Arise, Firebird, Greenwood Avenue, our film and Cycle of Memory are all documentaries that are not in traditional distribution yet, because they're in a phase where they are earning money from screenings and doing educational programming and things with the films. Jimmy, who made Arise, Firebird, she's on track to make her first 6 figures from her film, and she had never made a film before she made this film. And then these films, I didn't work on the fundraising, but I worked on the distribution. The Cutlass was a movie from Trinidad and Tobago, and that was the first film I was ever involved with distribution. So those are some of my films. I'm very grateful to Emily for all her work on that, but we've just put this together as a kind of, a summary of different films that my clients have made, and I'm very, very proud of all their work. So yes, thank you, Emily. Thank you for doing that. Does anybody have any final questions? Otherwise, we can go. And as I said, please book a time to talk to me. Let's get to work. Let's get raising some money. I would love to help you. And you know, I'm always teaching. I do a clubhouse room every Tuesday. I do an interview with filmmakers every other Thursday. We'll have one interview this Thursday. And everything I do is teaching fundraising. And I have dedicated my life to teaching filmmakers how to raise money. It's a very simple thing. My book is about it. Every class I teach is about it. Everything I do is about teaching filmmakers to raise money. And as I said, you know, thank you, Maria. As I said, you know, you haven't been taught it before. And I know that for 100% sure. You have not been taught it. So thanks everybody for coming. And thank you, Emily, for keeping us all together. And I look forward to talking to you and working with you. Take care, everybody. Good night.